So you might remember, it wasn't a long time ago, it was only 2 years ago. We went through some changes in how you reserve. When you reserve, you call Joan Helmick. Remember Joanne? You just send her a message, hey, do you have any availability in this room on this date? And Joanne would refer you to the website, the NTID master calendar. From there, you could see who was hosting what, and then you can reserve through that system at that time. However, FMS and catering were separate systems. So there was a lot of phone calling, a lot of arrangements being made, a lot of emailing. Within the new system that was established 2 years ago, they started right in the beginning of the first week of school. It was crazy trying to learn the new system at the same time, making sure that things weren't double booked. Joanne really handled all of that so well, bless her heart. That was really hard work on her part. She really handled everybody. So now the new event management system, or EMS, takes care of room reservations, FMS, and the master calendar. It's all in one place. It also includes catering. EMS will show you what the policy looks like for a specific event or the room that you're reserving and the catering policies that go along with it. Are you familiar with campus groups? Does anyone use campus groups, or you ever heard of campus groups? Campus groups is another place where clubs and organizations can book space on campus. They have to register their event via campus groups. They don't register it through NTID. So if it's a student club and they want a big space, they'll go through the Center for Campus Life and campus groups, and then that board will go ahead and reserve things. Question?
I'll come up. It says campus groups. Now, is that replacing the old system with EVR, the events registration system? Is that what campus groups does or did?
I think it was in 2008 or 9. EVR kind of shrank for club organizations, and they switched to using the link. The link system would allow to see what, clubs could talk with catering and FMS and event space all in one software system. So recently it changed to campus groups. Was that last year? 2 years ago now?
2 years ago.
This system is controlled by the Center for Campus Life to make sure that all the clubs and organizations follow the rules. If they don't follow through with letting public safety know they have an event happening in a certain space, or they don't take care of their catering properly, CCL has the right to cancel their event. EVR changed to EMS for faculty staff. No one can cancel our events.
Thank you.
I should probably clarify that last thing that I said. It's not 100% true that no one can cancel our events. Some events take priority. So, for example, Erin is running an open house. That is a priority for the campus. Marissa's pretty good at reaching out to everyone and saying, hey, there's another big event on campus. They have a lot more people in their event. Do you mind negotiating, maybe switching rooms, switching spaces? The flexibility of having someone to reach out to is very helpful.
Before, when we had the old system, you couldn't see who else had made any reservations in whatever spaces. So if I wanted to book something at the last minute, if I had a visiting group, didn't have a lot of notice that they were coming in, and I needed a space because they were high priority because they were coming to campus, I could not see who had reserved what rooms. So I was not able to contact that person directly and ask for them to change. These are people that are coming in as important. Can we swap rooms? So now with the new system, I can. So there's a field that you can click on, and it will show who has that room reserved for that particular time. It's just a nice advantage. I don't have to bother Marissa. I can go directly to the person. Before, I would have to ask Marissa.
That's absolutely right. Some people, I will put people in touch with other people. Like there are two groups who need space. You guys talk to each other. Some details are private, so you won't be able to see who has it. And if that's the case, contact me because I can see it. If there's a classroom in that space, I cannot change that because classes and students take priority. So I can put you in touch with the professor and you guys can work it out if you're both flexible.
Meaning you can't change it yourself, though, correct?
Okay, so I can't book LBJ rooms until after add drop week is over because class schedules take priority.
Per semester, correct, per semester.
Before I go ahead and show you how to make a reservation, I want to show you something that Hope Williams showed me earlier. And I didn't know it for a while. You know, I was kind of just playing with this system. I'm going to show you a shortcut. Keep in mind, when you click on the drop-down menu, it's hard to see. Click on My Account under your name. And then it'll have all your pertinent details. Delegates. Why would we have delegates named in the system? So you might book a room for a specific group of people. I'm the liaison for NCE. So when NCE is hosting an event, I can add Regina as a delegate. So she will get a notification letting her know that the room has been reserved. And you can add as many people as you like. Some departments, you know, have the entire department in as delegates, so they're all in the loop. And you can go ahead and add individuals as you like. Now, under personalization, you can use templates. If you tend to make the same kind of room reservation consistently, you can set a template. I tend to reserve 1300 and 1445 pretty often, so that's reserved as a template. You can find your template in the reservation form. In the tab that says My Favorite Rooms, these are the places you tend to book. The system will show you where. So you see that big, huge, long list. Students see 3. It's very important that I let them know why. Faculty assume students can book any room in the building. It's not true. If they're on the e-board of the room, they have the privilege of booking rooms in this building. If they're not on the e-board, they have to work through Center for Campus Life to work directly with CCL. They cannot contact Marissa, and they're all the way over in the SAU. Many of our students here can swipe and get access into any of the meeting rooms in the SDC. But in LBJ, that is much more restricted.
2 things I want to emphasize. Requesting a meeting space for all over campus, campus-wide, except for Rosica and LBJ. It won't show up under this particular heading. And the next one down is request NTID space. You'll get Rosica, LBJ, and the SDC. Those 3 buildings will show up. So those are 2 separate tabs, if you will. If you want to request an outside space, like the outside space, the quad, you have to go to recreation space, recreational space. Am I right? Right under NTID space. Now, if I want to find my favorites, type in the room number. So you have to click and then you get a drop down. This is a faster way. If you want to go to your favorites, then you don't have to do all this clicking. Another feature that might be important for you, maybe not, is suppose you know the number of people that will fit in a room. You need to know the number, and you're not sure which room has the capacity for how many people you want to come. Let's say you have 200 people coming, and you need a room that'll fit that many folks. See this add the filters. Well, let's say if you have 200 people, or maybe you're just looking for a room that has a smart TV in it. You don't want the traditional projectors. You want the smart TV set up. Or perhaps you're looking for a room that has a whiteboard or the really nice tables and chairs. Let's go for 500 people.
Will they only list what's available during that day and time, or is it just a huge list?
No, it's just a list of that will accept 200 people and above. Some will be outside, off campus, and some will be outside, some will be inside. If you want to narrow the list, you have to click on another filter and pick a time you want, and that'll show you what's available. What's not available won't show up. I'd like to put out there also that while this space is pretty much free use space, there are some spaces that are not, like the Dyer Art Gallery. They charge by the hour there if you want to use their facilities. SAU, they might have a charge there. I'm not really sure because I haven't reserved anything over there in quite some time. But I do know that there is a charge for FMS services over there, and it's a requirement to have a staff person on site for that particular space. Clark Gym costs.
The Vignelli Gallery costs money.
They're also added just recently the Alumni House. You've heard about the new Alumni House. You can book there too, but it is quite pricey. It does cost to use that space. How much does it cost for Dyer? Does everybody know the cost? It's $30 an hour, I believe. The last time I reserved the Dyer, it was $30 an hour.
That was my experience as well.
Aaron Calstone just said that the theater as well, the Panera has a charge associated with it too. It's not free to book. I would say most of the rooms here and the SLC, SDC are free. If there's a cost coming with it, it'll probably be because of FMS. If you want them to set up the room in a very specific way, that's going to cost money. And I think they charge by the hour for their services for setup. Do you want to talk about going back to adding services, Marissa?
Yes. Once you make your room reservation, you might be wondering how you get back to adding services such as FMS and catering. So you got the room, you feel like you can't go back within the system. So you can go back. So in the upper right-hand corner, it says add services. So then you see catering, FMS. So after you make your room reservation, you can add services. some details like the catering, they have specific, how many days prior to the event?
It's 48 hours prior to the event. If it's a large food setup, they might ask for 2 weeks in advance.
FMS requires 72 hours notice prior to services. Once you're past that, you're too late. You're out of luck. So really, planning ahead is much better strategy.
But also, too, you can cancel as well. I've reserved catering before, and as long as I cancel within a week ahead of the event, it's fine. They will not charge you anything. It's the same for FMS. You can always cancel something that you've asked for, but of course you have to do that ahead of time. I would assume for FMS you have to cancel within 72 hours. For external vendors, my understanding, the policy here is, for external vendors, is RIT has a list of approved vendors. Most updated information I don't have, but you can go through the legal team to find out, or risk management team from RIT. Give them a call, ask who's on the list, or the senior staff assistant probably already knows who those vendors are, who's approved and who's not approved, especially if they've been doing all the transactions with them. Some tips. Suppose you have a large event with a lot of people that are going to be attending. Make sure you add garbage. And you don't want the room stinking up. You don't want them to be overfilled. And it costs absolutely nothing. You might want to rent a barbecue grill. It costs absolutely nothing. You have to just supply the coals and something to start the fire and the tools. But the grill itself is free. You can rent up to 2.
You want to make sure that you request cleanup services afterwards, vacuuming and trash removal. Sometimes people forget, and the next day after an event, another group comes into the room and it's a mess. If we have open house Friday morning, sometimes if there's an event Thursday night, it's hard for FMS to get in there and clean everything up. But make sure you have allowances. Anytime you request, you put in a request for cleanup.
Think about like if we have the popcorn machine going, that's messy. You can also borrow a vacuum from our office, which is right around the corner, the SLT office. It's 1200. It's right around the corner from here. You can borrow some cleaning supplies over there. A vacuum is over there. We have a broom over there. You can always borrow from us if you're working down here. Just all you have to do is leave your ID and borrow them, and we'll give your ID back when you bring the equipment back. What about parking? This is new. There's a new addition here, parking.
Yeah, that is new.
So let's say if you want to have a guest speaker come on campus and you want to reserve a specific parking space for that person, you can do so under this tab. Suppose that you're hosting a summer program or that you want to host a conference during the summer and you need to transport people. You can rent a van from the Parking and Transportation office for $65 a day, $65 a day here on campus. So it's a 6-person van. It's really nice to have that option. Right, one caveat is you do need to be certified to drive a van. You need a New York license. And if you have an out-of-state license, you have to bring a copy of your driver's record because we have to make sure that it's clean. And then you take, it's a 10-question little quiz. The answers are all online. Dave Baldwin will actually test you, and once you're done with that, he'll hand you your certification, which is then good for 1 year, and you can renew it every year. So it's just good to have that on hand if you need the transportation. Also, the staff themselves want to go out of state to a conference, a group. You can save money instead of flying. let's say if you want to drive to Maryland, you can also use the passenger van for that as well. But again, you have to go through the reservation system to reserve that van. It's $65. No, the certification is free. The certification is free. $65 is for the van a day. If it's not free, you let me know, please, because that's my information, is that it's free to get certified to drive the van. And to rent it, it's $65 a day. They have many vans that are available, just to let you know. It's a blueprint or a floor plan, campus maps. There are many words that we use for these diagrams. How many of you have created your own from scratch? From scratch, right? You've done your own. A lot of people have. One of the comments that has popped up on the first screen was, where do I find this map? I'll show you where. Type in your ID and your password. Here are all the buildings on campus. Let's look at this building here we're in right now. First floor, we're on. And there's a floor plan for the floor. And you can print that as well. You can draw on it if you want. FMS just recently added a new feature. They haven't released it out to all of us yet, but will be soon. They're making the process easier to figure out how many tables will fit in a room, how many chairs you would need or that would fit in a space. And they'll be showing their template that they've developed. Once I'm done with this presentation, I'm going to send you all an email, and then you can use that to add to your computer. This only applies to those who have Publisher. If you have a Mac, you can't use Publisher. You can only use that on a PC.
I tend to use this quite often. It's great because it makes planning out where we're going to put the tables and the chairs easier. You can copy and paste all the different seating arrangements into the center. So the Dyer Arts is different because the Dyer Arts has their own templates, and you can't move furniture around, so FMS does not have access to the Dyer Arts Center. But those of us who work there, after the exhibit is taken down, you'll be sent pictures and a floor map, so you have access to that to make arrangements for your event within the center. Click on the feature and then drag it over. So it's nice because this orange round, you can see how many seats are there. So if you need a certain number of seats available, put it in the space, and then you can play with it.
What was new from 2 years ago is they added FMS event position. There are two people that are on a team. I showed you the names before, Kathleen Rydelek and Katie, whose former name was Katie Short, but now she's married, so it's DeLuca. The two of them were sent to an FMS event. They typically will respond. One time you'll get Kathleen, and another time you'll get Katie. But both are terrific women. If you have any questions like the popcorn machine or anything, email them.
Just to clarify, if you want to use Panera Theater or the dance studio or 1510, that's Black Box Theater, any of those spaces, you'll see them on the reservation list. And it'll ask, do you want to use Panera? When you click on that, it will route you to our department. We'll get your reservation request. We'll check our schedule because we have a lot of events that go on. We have rehearsal for plays. We have presentations that happen, presidential addresses. So we will look at the calendar, make sure that your event fits within our calendar, and then we'll get directly to you and say, yes, you may use Panera for this time and date that you've requested. And then we'll give you the charge for use of the facilities. And then we make sure that everything goes according to plan. Often, if you have an event in Panera and you want something in Dyer as well, we have to coordinate separately because there's a charge for Panera and Dyer Arts also charges. So if there's a microphone and a projector that needs to be used, then I'll have to get the cost. So you might have 3 different bills coming to your department, depending on your type of event. If you're using Panera, 1510, or the dance space, your request will be rerouted to my department. It's a little bit different than other spaces on campus. And just as long as you get your okay, you will be good. But don't be surprised by having multiple bills because there are many events from July to May 30th. And we have a little bit of time in June to do some maintenance and some cleaning, and then the whole crazy schedule starts all over again.
One thing about general meeting space, like this room at the SDC, you can book a year in advance. So right now, I can reserve for open house a year in advance. Before, that wasn't always the case in the old system. So my last open house will be July 4th, April 24th. I can book it for next year. Because like we mentioned earlier, open house has a priority. It's future students. So the only place you can't book that far in advance are the classrooms. You know, like Erin said earlier, that we have to wait until the add drop period, which is a Tuesday or Wednesday after of the second week of classes for each semester. So that 1 year in advance doesn't necessarily apply to every space here on campus, so don't assume that. You know, when we say all, like for the Magic Center, that's another place that probably you can't, or you can, I'm sorry, the Magic Center you can. The SAU, perhaps you can a year in advance. But if you already know in advance, book it as soon as you can, basically. This is a question from Marissa. Suppose I book a room for a workshop or something like that. Do you have to book in the time for setup or just reserve for the event? Again, which do I reserve, the time of the event or for any prep and cleanup afterwards?
That is a really great question. My suggestion is to include setup and breakdown time in your reservation. So then we can email you and say, let me know what time the event starts, and then we'll know how much time ahead of time. But if you already made a big chunk of time in your reservation, it's helpful. From my experience, some people reserve events starting at, like, for example, 1 and then 3, but then they don't make arrangements for setup and cleanup. And they think they're fine, but then there's another event butting up against theirs. So it throws everything off. So please do make time in your reservation for setup and cleanup. And then we'll get exact times from you about when your event will begin. That'll make it easier for us to communicate with the other services we're coordinating within the center.
And to add to that, some people don't realize if you're hosting a big event here on campus, or program or whatever, but you don't want any other outside events like Ellie's Place, you need to book that. Like if you book this room and you don't book Ellie's Place, somebody else could book that. Let's say if they have a music festival going on out there and you've got a conference going on in here. It's two separate places, but you'd have to book both of them. And there's A and B of the first floor. It's in front of the SLT office. It's reserved for tabling for different events, that outside space. It's called A and B of the first floor. It's for passive events. You can also book things out there. So if you want an event in here, you might have to book out there as well.
Another thing to keep in mind, if you're hosting a conference or there's a camp or just a very large-scale event, that requires more than one day. Maybe you'll be in this room for 2 or 3 days, but you need the tables moved and you need tech support to stay. So make sure you reserve it all day and all night so you can keep the setup as is for the next day's events. So then tech support doesn't have to come in and set up again. So they can book and set everything up initially and then just leave it.
Same with Outreach and SVP, they book 24/7 for their stuff, just for that reason, so they can stay set up.
Between the Dyer Art Center and the LBJ, the street area, you can book that area as well. The first floor of LBJ, what is often referred to as the street, you can book that. Any more questions? My event, we tend to have student workers who are involved. So I'm wondering if they're co-op or full-time, I'm not sure. Can that student be named as a delegate on my event reservation request? And can that student also use a van, be a driver in the van if they get certified and we need to move people around?
Yes, as long as that person has an RIT email account, they can be a delegate. You can add them as a delegate. Basically, it means that you've reserved the space, but this is a secondary person who gets all the information. They'll get the emails letting you guys know what's going on. And they also can have swipe access. So they're part of the group. You can also email directly to Marissa and Sharon Van de Zande. I don't know how to spell her last name, but Sharon V. over at FMS with Chris Kanega. And give them the names of the people and specific times that they need swipe access. You can add them as a delegate. It's possible they could be given a billing account number, or they can see the billing account number for anything that you're ordering for the room. Now, as far as the van certification and driving, yes, absolutely. Some of the summer outreach program people do use student staff to transport students to the airport and back, so yes, they can. They have to go through the van certification process, of course. The moment that you hire a person, go through a checklist of what they need to do. So you can get in touch with Dave Baldwin directly and ask, how to start the process for the van drivers as soon as you hire staff members. It could take up to 3 weeks to get certified, so the earlier the better. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate this. My office, again, it's right across from the grind. Stop by, email me, contact either of these two. We just want to make sure that your reservation experience is a good one and it's worth your time. Keep in mind that the reservations will change quite often, the system. So we'll host this again in the springtime.